Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of the video series about doing a mechanical to an electronic fan conversion for your Jeep XJ. So let's dive right in. First, you're going to need a Ford Taurus fan. And they are from the late 80s to mid 90s Ford Taurus or the Mercury Sable models with the 3.8 liter V6 motor. It's pretty easy to identify the fan. It should have 3 wires. One is for low, one is for high, and one is for the ground. There's also the, when you grab that fan, make sure to get the plug with it as well. It's pretty easy to pull out of the vehicle. You don't have to tear a bunch of stuff to get to it. Basic tools, you'll be able to pull that fan right out. Just make sure that it spins smoothly, obviously, once you get it out. And if you see more than one in there, I might want to grab a second. All right, moving on. Next would be to upgrade your alternator. Because of the fan requirements, or the power requirements that the Taurus fan pulls, you need to be able to produce more power or amperage. That fan, I think on startup on high, will pull approximately 100 to 130 amps for a few milliseconds, and then running it'll maintain about 30 to 40 amps. That's based on what I've researched on the internet. That I didn't measure that, but that's what they're saying. So the stock XJ alternator, I think, is 90 amps, which is not sufficient enough. I know there's a heavy duty tow edition or something that might have 117 amp alternator. I opted to go with the Tucson alternator. It's a higher amp alternator. I think it's called Pure Power or something like that. It's 170 amps, and at idle it'll push 130 amps, which is more than sufficient because you're running lights, maybe an upgraded stereo if you're using your winch, and then that fan's running, you're already taxing that system. So I felt it was important to upgrade. An alternate upgrade would be, I think, the Dodge Dakota or a Grand Cherokee has a 136 amp version of the alternator. You can get those out of a junkyard much cheaper. If you do your research, you'll figure out which one you need for that. It was about $330 for the Tucson one. So that's the way I went. All right. Moving on, you also need to upgrade your charging cables and your grounds. The cables that are on a stock XJ are very, very small in gauge. You're pushing a lot more amperage, so you need to upgrade those. I know you can make your own, probably save a bunch of money. I ordered mine from jeepcables.com. I went with the 2 gauge wire, and that was about $150. So you'll notice just doing that, your Jeep will start much easier. Some additional items you're gonna need will be some either 8 or 10 gauge wiring to wire the fans for power. I think a 10 gauge wire is probably sufficient. It's about $20. You need 2 either 8 to 10 gauge Maxi fuses that have a 60 amp fuse in there. I picked those up from a local stereo shop. It has the Maxi fuse holder and it came with the 60 amp fuse. I think they were $20 a piece. Like I said, stereo shop is a good place to get those. You also need 8 different colors of 16 gauge wire. That's for building a wire harness from your fan controller. We'll talk about the fan controller in a minute. But you need to build a wire harness for all the for the temp sensor, power, and some other things for the controller. So that was that. And then I purchased some. I think Harbor Freight has shrink tubing in long lengths, and I used that to cover the entire wire loom. So the subtotal, I think, for upgrading the cables and getting all the wires and the fuses, I think comes out to about $243. Now let's talk about the fan controller. You need some way to turn that fan on and off. I've read some people use, I think, a thermal switch out of a BMW. You could manually wire it and manually turn it on and off. I opted to go with the Dakota digital fan controller. It's a Bluetooth fan controller. It's the PAC 2800 BT. It includes 170 amp relay. It's 165 bucks for it. I like it because I can connect it to my phone. I can program it while I'm driving if I want. It allows me to set the temperatures when the low fan turns on, when the low fan turns off. I can also do the same for the high when high turns on, when high shuts off. And then also you can have that fan run longer after the engine is shut off. With that fan, with the Bluetooth app, you can have it running while you're driving down the road. You can see exactly when the fans turn on, when they shut off, and the temperatures that things are running. So that, the controller I said I think was 165 bucks, and on that. So next you need a temperature sending unit. I opted to use the one from Dakota Digital because I mean, I figure it's just going to work. Like I said, you could probably try others. For 35 bucks, I just went with that. It's the model DAK-140022. That needs to be put into something. So I picked up on Amazon, and I'll post a link on this. I cut into the upper radiator hose and put this aluminum adapter, which the temp sending unit screws into, and that's where I'm pulling my temp. So it's pretty close right after the upper radiator hose comes out of the radiator. You will need a second relay. Dakota Digitals, you can pick up that one. It's an RLY-3. It's 37 bucks. You could probably get a cheaper one. I went with another 70 amp relay. You need one for the high and one for low. If you use the Dakota Digital controller, it includes one of the relays, so you only need to get a second one. Okay, and then moving on, because you're cutting out the mechanical fan, you need to get a shorter serpentine belt. I ended up with a K060795, about 20 bucks. So the 79.5 on the length for that, on the serpentine belt. All right, so if you add all that up, I think I mentioned in the last video, one of the cons is it's kind of expensive. So I spent 870 bucks on all of the parts. Some of these would be upgrades that I would do normally without even doing a mechanical to E-fan. I would have upgraded my alternator. Probably would have gone the cheaper 136 amp. I've already upgraded the charging cables, so that part in there. You could go cheaper, like I said, on how you turn that fan on and off. This is the way I did it. Seems to be working just fine. I've had it in here since July of 2024, and it's now January 2025. Zero issues. I've had no problems with any of the fuses popping or anything like that. If you are an electrical engineer and you see that, hey, you shouldn't be running that let's say relay or that fuse with this based on the power requirements, please post down below. I'm not an electrical engineer. We're here to help other people to figure out a good solution and educate them. So like I said, it's worked perfectly for me. I've had zero problems. And so there you have it. Those are the steps or the parts that I used. The next video, we're gonna go ahead and I'll show you what I had to do from my modification standpoint to get this in, how close things are, where I had to cut the fan, I had to cut the mount for the air conditioner. So there's some things that I had to do. Again, shout out to Martin Built. I probably wouldn't have done this without his previous video on there. So hey, make sure you're liked and subscribed. I'm trying to grow my channel, have more XJ content, and I appreciate it.